Some of the content contained in this podcast may prove challenging to some listeners. Discretion is advised. Please contact a member of your local support group or a relevant and accredited support organisation if affected and help is required. Hi, and welcome to My Service, My Story, a collaborative podcast between the Warragul and Drouin Gazette and the Warragul RSL. I'm Gazette journalist Nicholas Duck, and joining us today is our very special guest, John Grace. John, thank you for coming in and taking the time.
My pleasure. Thanks for asking me.
No worries at all. You've got quite a story to tell, and we'll get stuck straight into it. If you wanted to start, John, by just telling us a bit about your childhood, where you grew up, and some of your background, that would be great.
From what I understand from my birth certificate, I was born in Hawthorn, Victoria. I can't remember too much for the first couple of years, but Dad was a policeman at that stage, and I believe he only spent a couple of years in Melbourne and then moved to Hamilton in the Western District. And from Hamilton, that's basically where I grew up, went to primary school and started first year secondary school. They called it high school in those days, secondary school. And then he shifted to Kyneton, so that was it. I ended up going to Kyneton High School, which is mid-central. And whilst at Kyneton, the Department of Defence or Navy decided that they would be looking for future non-commissioned officers to lead the Navy, and started a junior recruit training scheme, taking boys 15 and a half to 16 and a half away from their parents and totally indoctrinating us over a 12-month period into the ways of the Navy. They took us all the way over to Lewin, which is now Lewin Barracks. It's been taken over by the Army, unfortunately. And we stayed there for 12 months with one break of 3 weeks in winter, thank goodness, which brought us back home, and then back down there for the second 6 months of our training.
When they did come and they presented to you that you could join up at, well, what is a remarkably young age, and as you said, very young age, I'm sure that program would fly with no problems whatsoever in today's climate, of course. There'd be no issues.
Oh, we've had politicians who have said we would never had children that age join the Navy.
Yeah.
They certainly forgot about the 13-year-old midshipman that joined Jervis Bay.
Yeah. Wow.
Post-war and right up to, recent days.
Tell you what, I've been talking to some of these blokes and they say, oh yeah, I joined up at 18, 19, and I think, wow, that's so young, I couldn't imagine that. And here you are joining up at, how old were you when you first...
I was 16 years and I think something like 16 days.
Well, we'll stay there for 1 second in that moment. I'm just curious what was going through, I suppose, your thought process when you decided that this was something that you wanted to take up, because that is a remarkably young age to do that sort of thing. What were you thinking at the time?
At the time, I was glad to leave school. I had enough. I wanted to do something to get away from home. I reckon I was old enough to know what was going on and was happy to get out.
Did you have any sort of history of military service in your family? Had anyone in your family joined up with any sort of service before?
My great uncle was in Gallipoli and then over Belgium, around a few places there until he demised. Dad was in the Navy. He was a, what do they call it, duration member. So I had a bit of an idea of what I thought was the Navy was all about, but...
It's never quite what
you imagine after a few years.
Yeah, so your father being in the Navy, had that been an influence on your decision, would you say, or did it...
Pretty much so, yes. I'd read all the books that he'd collected from the war, Mark II, Mark IV, Shropshire, Canberra, and those things, and thought, my dad's been around the world. Oh, I reckon this is good for me. I'll see some of it too.
What was the response from your parents when you came to them and you said, Mum, Dad, I want to give it a crack?
The traditional. Mum didn't want me to go and Dad said, glad to see him go.
Yeah, so he was keen to see you following in his footsteps in a way?
Oh, I think he was keen to see me grow up and get out of the house.
especially since school, as you said, probably wasn't quite for you.
No,
Well-
not the ideal scholar.
So when you did join up at age 16, you said, you know, you had these images of travelling around the world. What were you picturing before you joined up and got right into it?
Oh, life in the ocean waves, exotic ports,
Yeah.
plenty of things, yeah. New experiences.
I'm just curious because, among the people that we've spoken to for this series, I think you might be the first one that we've spoken to that joined up voluntarily for service. We've spoken to a lot of conscripts and sort of their thought process. But yeah, it's interesting to hear you talking about it because, like I said, I just can't imagine. I couldn't imagine making that decision at this age now, 26, much less 10 years ago when I was 16. It's fascinating. So when you did sign up and you joined up, take me through it. What was that like?
Well, I thought it was pretty good. The first 6 weeks were good. One of the things I remember vividly, it was after we'd been through Lonsdale and sworn our fealty to the Queen, we were then transported to Spencer Street Station, and I'm chatting there with family and friends, saying, yes, I'm going off on this big adventure. And all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I see this carriage moving past me. Hey, that's our train. So I was lucky. In those days, they had a little caboose on the back of the train. I put the arm out, swung around on it, and got a free trip to Perth.
Yeah. When you did sign up, what sort of period of time were you expected to be joining up for?
We were expected to sign up for 12 years.
Yeah, which is just an incredible amount of time at any point in your life to really dedicate yourself to. But age 16, I mean, that's, not far off almost the entirety of your life up until that point. Did you give much thought to it at that point?
Not early.
Yeah.
As I got into it, I thought, yes, I'm going to be here till I'm 28, 29,
Yeah.
Is this going to be successful for me? It turned out that it wasn't successful, but yeah, I had a bit of fun in the meantime.
Yeah. Oh, the optimism of youth and all that. So you get on the train, you're on your way, and what happens next?
There's pretty much a blur, the train, the 3 to 5 days I think we've spent going across the Nullarbor into Adelaide and all those places. When we got off the other end at Fremantle, we were met by the usual, I suppose, group of NCOs and that, but there was no shouting, no yelling.
NCOs meaning?
Non-commissioned officers.
Yep.
Yep.
Thank you.
Anybody under the rank of sub-lieutenant in those days. I don't know if they have any of them here. And it all seemed fairly civil. So at least we arrived where we were going, to Lewin, in daylight. And it was interesting to see what we were going to go into rather than get there in the middle of the night. Like I've heard of lots of people who have had that experience, both Army, Navy, and we were billeted in probably units or huts of 30 boys. There might have been more. I just can't remember. They were the old fibro cement, no roof, no proper gable roof, but no ceiling, no insulation.
So you're exposed to the elements.
No, they had walls.
From the top, if it rains, were you getting rained on?
No, they were asbestos roofs. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And the next morning at 5:45, reality struck. We're all out there in our civilian clothing and made to run down the hill and fall into some sort of assembly for a bit of marching and practice.
Were you much of a morning person before that point?
No, I don't think I was much of an anything person before that point.
Sorry, just leaving your home at age 16, was there much that you were leaving behind that you were sorry to leave behind?
I didn't really think about that. I had quite a few friends that I left behind at Kyneton. Unfortunately, most of them have passed away now, various things. And no, it was just a big adventure for me. I was happy to get away and make something different.
Fair enough. I think very different 16-year-old to what I would have been like. I would have been an absolute mess if I had to do it at age 16. So you're in Fremantle. You've just begun your training proper. What was that like?
Being the lowest of the low in the service, everybody was above us, and we had to call everybody sir. when we were issued our uniform, we'd sent our statistics and measurements up. So we were presented with this very large bag. It was about, probably a metre and a little bit taller, with all our gear in it. So we had proceeded to tip it all out on the floor, pick it up, and there was an instructor at one end of the big trestle that we all were standing at, and showed us how to ink the pad with not water-based paint, the normal paint used these days. And we were all issued with a name tag, a metal one, which we were told to dip it in there gently, stretch your shirt, whatever was it, and put it on the left breast, making it sure it's the right way round. And boy, did you get some abuse if it was upside down the first time. And that took about 2.5 hours. By the time we'd finished with that, we were confused, wondering what the hell next. And then we were all bundled out to race up to the washing machines and the laundry to wash as much as we could so that we could get into a uniform for the next day and start our real indoctrination.
And what did that look like?
Marching, calling everybody sir, running, doubling from point A to point B, learning the routine, how many hours you've got in the day.
Had you been prepared for that level of, I suppose, strict discipline? Had that been something you were expecting, or?
I wasn't, but with the mix of boys that were there, some of them had come from institutions, some of them had come from public schools, private schools. We were quite an eclectic mix of people.
Did you get along with one another?
You've read Lord of the Flies?
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Initially, everybody was jockeying for some sort of position, and the hierarchy came through. And usually it was the boys from the institutions ended up being the leaders of the group.
Funny how that works.
Yeah.
Where did you find yourself in this hierarchy?
Oh, somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. Probably the better place to be, isn't it?
I learned to stand up for myself fairly quickly.
Yeah. Any particular, I don't know, stories of conflict come out of there? It sounds like you guys might have had a few.
Not so much conflict, but the whole idea of it was to give us discipline and teach us to be on time, correctly dressed, and in the right place. I'm sure that the instructors went out of their way to make sure that we got punished somewhere along the line. Beds not made, towels not hanging properly, shoes not shined, your belt and gaiters not brassed up and white calicoed enough. And so then you found yourself having extra duties when normally other people were supposedly sitting in the dormitory, cleaning their gear and getting ready for the next onslaught tomorrow.
What did your average punishment look like? What did they make you do?
We were all issued with the old Lee Enfield 303 rifles, probably on about the 4th day after we'd got our uniforms. But we had to take them back to the armoury each night and pick them up each morning. The punishment was running around the parade ground with either suspended above your head, both arms.
Right.
Or if you were particularly naughty, you was made to stand out in the middle of the parade ground with the rifle hanging down with your arms stretched straight out horizontal to the ground. And somebody was constantly reminding you that it's only 9.5 pounds. Don't drop it. Your arm, pick your arm up, and after a while that gets through it and you think, this is heavy.
Yeah. Did you ever cop any particular punishments for anything?
Oh, I was late at times like everybody else. My gear wasn't particularly up to the standard that somebody wanted at another time. It was all designed not to victimise us, but to make us just that little bit more particular with what we had.
I can't believe you get together a bunch of 15 and 16-year-olds and not have them already be the most disciplined, well-drilled unit possible. That's crazy.
It only took 6 weeks.
Well, okay. How did you come out the other side of those 6 weeks? What was the difference between the John who went in and the John who came out?
Well, I'd learnt all the ropes.
Yeah.
Well, I thought I had. And I was a little bit more savvy. You still didn't get a perfect score in the whole 12 months you were there. What else did we have? We had PT every morning. We had sports at between 4 o'clock at night.
Oh, what were you playing with each other?
We had cross-country runs, which were about 6Ks. We had football, cricket, and they were going to make a hockey oval while we were there, but that took another 5 years.
Yeah. What was the most challenging part of that period, that training period for you?
Well, there were two aspects to it. One is that we went as a group and we were each given the opportunity, well, we were volunteered for it, to see how we were as leading a group of boys or men. And every 3 months, I think, it was your turn to lead the group. And that was a bit difficult for me. I wasn't used to bossing people around. And then remembering who was here, there and everywhere. When you had to report, everybody turn up at parade. You had to race out to the officer on charge and shout out at the top of your voice what division you were in, how many people were in it, who was at sick bay, who wasn't, and woe betide you if you forgot someone.
Well, on the other end of it, was there anything that came just extremely naturally to you? Was there something that you really...
I enjoyed the physical exercises, the PT and the running.
Yeah.
Pretty good on the cross country.
Yeah, good. So you're pretty fit already going into it.
We were all fit. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you get to the end of that. Sorry, was it 6 weeks?
That was only the beginning.
That was only the beginning. What next?
That whole process lasted 12 months.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Wow.
Not just 6 weeks. At the end of 6 weeks, we were all brought into the divisional officer's office individually and asked, "How have we gone? Do you wish to continue with the service? You can turn around now and say no. There will be no recriminations, and we'll put you on the plane, train, and send you home." I don't think too many took the option up. Some did.
Yeah.
Some sort of missed their home life.
You didn't give it any thought?
No, I was happy.
Yeah. In it for the long haul.
I was an individual. I was ready to go.
Yeah. Okay. Well, once you finished your 12 months then, what was the next step?
The next step then was to go to Cerberus for rate training. Rate being...
Cerberus being...
Flinders Naval Depot, Hastings.
Hastings, okay. Yep.
Everybody either went there or some of the ordinary seamen went straight out to sea. So you had 17-year-olds going straight out to sea.
But that wasn't you?
That wasn't me, no.
Yep.
I don't know whether I was lucky or unlucky. I've often pondered that. I would have preferred to go straight to sea, spend another 12 months out there and then come back or not. But as it turned out, I started off as a recruit writer, which was keeping all the paperwork for various personnel that moved around. And then I found that was claustrophobic. I wanted something that was a mixture of inside-outside, so I swapped over to stores assistant victualling, which gave me another 6 weeks training. And then I went on from there to remain at Cerberus for another 12 months in the victualling store, which was good but a bit boring because you were basically on a stone frigate with naval discipline and service things. But being a major training establishment, you had to keep certain standards up. But once you went to sea, that was different.
Yeah. Going back to your training, there are just two parts that I wanted to just touch on. And that was, I believe you had some involvement in the Commonwealth Games.
They were the two highlights. There were two highlights.
And there was a visit from Queen Elizabeth
That's right.
at some point.
Yeah. Her time when she came over.
Yeah, well, we'll start with the Commonwealth Games. Tell me a bit about that.
Basically, all our routines were suspended for the time of the Commonwealth Games, and we were used as ushers, dogs' bodies, runners around, and escorts for various people. We were generally dressed each morning in our number 10As, which is a pair of black shoes, a pair of black stockings, white Bombay bloomers, and the traditional blue-collared, square-collared white top. And we ran around the village, delivering milk, stores, helping people escorting people from point A to point B, and in general, having a bit of a nice ogle at some of the lovely young ladies who were in track and field and other things in the village. But we were there at 6 a.m. in the morning and we'd leave at about 4.
Did you get much of a view of the events as they were happening?
No, I didn't. Some people were lucky enough to be escorting people up into the stadiums and around the swimming, but I didn't.
So you got stuck on the periphery without actually getting to see a lot of the events.
That's all right, yeah.
And the Queen Elizabeth visit, what was that all about?
I think it was a world tour. She was going everywhere, yeah. We did a lot of, 120 of us were in the Guard. We did lots and lots of training. And once again, our normal routine was disrupted because we'd practice marching in order and open ranks, close ranks, salute, order arms and all that sort of stuff. So we looked pretty good on the day. The one thing that sticks out in my mind after we'd been standing on the wharf at Fremantle while she was getting organised to come off, she wasn't very well. The sea was a bit rough on the way over. And finally she came down the thwart and I thought, my goodness, she's looking very old. And I don't think she would have been that old at that stage. She was, suffering from the effects of seasickness.
And then when you consider how much longer she lived for, geez.
But when we snapped to attention and what they call ground our arms, instead of a rattle like a machine gun as everybody put theirs down, it just went perfect. It was one thump on the deck, and it was great.
Were you nervous at all when the event came? Because it's a pretty big deal to have the Queen walking past you.
No, she didn't look at us.
Probably passes
She'd,
blokes like
look at all
like
these. What are these young kids doing here? They should be back at school. Yeah.
So back to when you were completing your training. Okay, so let's go to when you finished your training.
Yep.
You're looking to get out on the sea at some point. Had you had much experience out on the sea before?
The only thing I'd ever done was go on a little boat on the lake down Hamilton Way somewhere.
So the idea of getting out there on the ocean itself, that was a whole new wide world for you. Yeah, okay. Well, what was it like when you finally did get to go out?
When I left Cerberus, I was posted to HMAS Derwent, and at that stage she was sitting in Sydney Harbour. So I remember carrying my complete kit over my shoulder. You know, it's got everything in it, everything I own. Walk up to the wharf, and I said, I'm here to join Derwent, and the bloke said, that's her over there, right in the middle of the harbour. I thought, how the hell am I going to get out there? So he said, sling your stuff down here and I'll take you out. So we potted across Sydney Harbour, and as this little vessel got bigger and bigger and bigger, I thought, oh, this is going to be my home for a while. Climbed on board, got all settled down, and it turned out that she was going back down to Melbourne, to Williamstown, for a major refit. So for 3 months, I spent most of my time on one of the destroyers that were in partial mothballs alongside, while we went on board each day to rectify whatever we needed to do and familiarise ourselves with the vessel.
So when you were on the vessel, what did your typical day look like?
It was pretty slack in refit. We'd get there about 8 o'clock, check to make sure whether the galley was working or where we had to put our foodstuffs, where we had to move anything, was anybody wanting anything extra, and then just sit around and wait to be told what to do for the rest of until 4 o'clock, and then knock off and either go out Williamstown, which I didn't particularly want to do, or go and sit around on the Voyager, the Vendetta or Voyager, one of the three that were there.
So you've almost gone from this highly controlled, disciplined environment of training, and you've gotten to the real thing, and it sounds like it's
pretty bland.
A lot more relaxed.
It was.
Sounds like you could get away with a lot more.
Right.
Right.
That was a bit of a shock, because at least going from the bottom rank and jumping up at least 2 ranks, you could boss people around underneath you, but that wasn't my scene.
Any particularly memorable stories from around then? Any antics that you might have gotten up to?
Only one night I can remember sitting up in there in my hammock and thinking, yeah, okay, I've finished reading a book, I'm going to go to bed, go to sleep. Next minute there's a big kerfuffle about 3 hammocks down from me. The head rope had snapped and the bloke had fallen straight down on his head and shoulder on the deck.
Right, that's a
most exciting bit of the time there.
It's a rude wake-up call, if ever there was one. So I suppose if we wanted to, could we skip ahead a bit maybe to your service to do with Vietnam?
Yep.
Because obviously the Vietnam War was happening. Australia was sending, plenty of troops over, plenty of supplies, plenty of whatnot. What did your role look like once, you were set to head out to Vietnam?
I'd been on Sydney for a while, so we had a standard routine, which was check the galley in the morning, check that we've got everything ready, make sure that the places where we stored the frozen foods, clothing, fresh goods, and dry stuff was shipshape, doesn't get rocked around when we're out at sea, and then just fill in our day. When it was announced that we knew Sydney had been converted already to a fast troop carrier.
This being the HMAS Sydney.
Sydney, yes, 3. And we just said, righto, we're going on the fourth trip, the third and the fourth trip over, and we're going to do it in a quick turnaround, which basically meant we'd take 3 to 4 days to load all the APCs, half trucks, ammunition and stores to keep the army guys fed while we're there, and then embark them and then take off. So we basically just chuffed off under sea routine. We had to be very secretive about where we went and what places we went up through Papua New Guinea and around that up to Vung Tau Harbour, and we were in darkened ship mode all the time. We had big blackout curtains, and you stepped into a blackout curtain if you wanted to go out onto the upper deck. You had to draw the curtain around behind you, make sure that all 4 were shut, open the hatchway, walk out, close the curtain, close the hatchway, and completely keep darkened ship. And that kept us going. And it was tropical. It was warm. Once you got past Brisbane into New Guinea, it was quite warm. Temperatures basically on board were hovered around the 40 degrees Celsius most of the time we were on board.
Was that difficult to deal with, that sort of conditions? Because that sounds pretty...
Oh, I didn't find it. I wasn't overweight, so it wasn't a great problem to me.
Yeah, implying that there were a few other blokes that maybe might have struggled.
Yes.
Yeah. So what sort of duties were you doing? So you were transporting troops to and from Vietnam, is that correct?
We transported them over.
Yeah.
We took, I think it was 5 Ra we took over the first time, or parts of 5 Ra. Came into around the bottom of Caps and Jacques and into the harbour, and I'm looking for something to do, so I'm up on the upper deck, the flight deck, and just looking to see what's happening and who's moving around, and all of a sudden these 3 jets just screamed in from one side of the harbour behind the hills, and I noticed them disappear. I thought, that's pretty spectacular. And next minute there's one crump, there's a second crump, and the third bloke followed through, and all these massive flames came over the top of the hills. It was obviously napalm, but the last bloke, I can vividly remember, he picked up and he's screaming up back into the sky, and in the vortex behind him there's this finger of flame following up his tailpipe.
Yeah.
I thought, that's pretty cool.
So you hadn't seen anything like that before?
No, that's closest I think we ever got to action.
So how long had you been serving before you'd started these trips to Vietnam?
I suppose nearly 2.5 years.
Yeah, and this was probably the first real, I suppose, conflict
Vision
that
of
you were
what
seeing.
we were seeing,
Yeah, okay. How many troops were you transporting at a time?
It was between 500 and 600.
Yeah.
That was probably our capacity to take over.
Was it a bit strange having, an extra 500 or 600 blokes on board?
No, because if as an aircraft carrier, she would have carried about 1,400 men anyway.
Yeah, okay. Did you get to interact much with these blokes on the way over?
They were pretty jovial on the way over, always looking for somewhere to hide so they didn't have to do PT or doubling around on the flight deck parade ground and exercises and stuff. We did have a bit of fun with them when we went across the equator, because we had new people to meet Neptune and his mermaids, his king and queen, but they took it all well.
I'm assuming you had a few less than stellar sailors in the mix who maybe couldn't handle being on the ocean.
No, most of the guys I knew were pretty had pretty much their sea legs.
Okay, good. All right, well, that would make it much easier. I had this vision of a few blokes really spilling their guts.
Well, mainly they were the army guys. Once we got up into the ocean itself, a little bit of a swell, and some of them weren't very well.
Were they mostly around your age?
The army blokes were at 19, 20.
So you taking these blokes over to Vietnam, how many trips like that did you end up doing?
I did 2. As I said, I did the quick turnaround. They called it Operation Hardihood. And we were in the harbour, I think, 3 days. We unloaded in 3 days. It was pretty quick. We then turned around and went straight back to Sydney, reloaded, This time we didn't take Army people back with us because the guys that had been replaced had been flown back, and all we had to do was put on the supplies, ammunition and more trucks and swing around and take them back up.
Yeah.
We got up there and we were very quick unloading. Took us 3 days, got it all off, and then we were out of there. Back in those days, the defence or the politicians didn't quite realise that where we were anchored, we were still in range of some of the weapons from the Viet Cong.
Well, I was going to ask about that because obviously, going into what is a war zone or a war-torn country, there'd certainly be some danger around. And I suppose as you want to, as you were saying, talk about some of the danger that you might have...
I didn't think about it. It was just something. I was there on the ship and that was it. I volunteered at one stage to do the deck sentry, which meant 4 a.m. until 8 a.m. I was up on the upper deck, much cooler. I was good thinking, instead of sweltering down below. And I used to watch the gunships, the American gunships, out on the flats. They would always have one light, their belly light was flashing red all the time. That's because they went out in twos. And one would be scarpering along the edge of the delta, and there'd be another one stuck up high. And all of a sudden you'd see these little fireflies trying to pick on the helicopter. And you'd see him scarper out, and the next bloke would come in, and it'd just be a complete blanket. And from, about a mile and a half away, you'd see this big flash, and then the 2 helicopters would go up, do another circle, and the other one would go down and try and tempt somebody to use him as a target. That wasn't scary to watch, but it was fascinating, and I thought, gosh, those guys doing that, putting themselves up there as a target, they're better than me.
Well, were you ever worried at all about potentially being a target or being hit by any sort of...
No. I suppose looking back on it, I should have been, but no, we weren't. I can always remember looking over the side, and the tide was either rushing in or rushing out, and it was a real murky colour. When we put divers over the side on a regular basis, they had lifelines, and they'd be in the water half an hour. They'd come up absolutely exhausted by trying to hang on and just move against the tide while they were inspecting the anchor chain or even the bottom of the vessel and the screws. But anybody who was floating down the Mekong, I don't know, I estimated they had about 40 seconds if they were in the right current that they would have actually bumped into us. And if they didn't, they would have just gone straight by.
So you went to Vietnam twice then?
Yep.
Taking troops over, so not taking troops back?
We didn't take troops back, no. No, we brought a lot of damaged vehicles back, but that was, because the troops we'd taken over, their 12 months deployment hadn't finished. It was later vessels that brought them back after their 12 months.
Did you definitely got up close and personal with some parts of the war, like that, as you said, the napalm and whatnot. Did you get a feel at all for what was really happening in Vietnam from what you saw from...
No, not really.
No.
We only had one other incident that I'm reminded of. We had a helicopter come down, the big American Huey, the traditional helicopter that you associate the Vietnam War with. He stepped out and I walked over to him and I said, "How you going, buddy?" He said, "Not too bad, man." He was a big black man. He was about 4 pick handles across the back.
Yeah.
And I said, "Can I help you?" And he said, "I'm after the captain." I said, "Yeah, I know. He's over there in the bridge." And he said, "Oh." I said, "Can I walk you over?" He said, "No worries, man." I said, "But by the way," I said, "That's a pretty bloody big gun you've got in your hip." He said, "Big." What did he say? He said, "Ain't much good, brother." He said, "But," he said, "it'll sure scare the hell out of me when I fire it." I could have put my finger down the barrel.
Yeah.
But I looked at his helicopter and he had about 8 holes in it.
Yeah, wow.
He didn't care.
So after those trips to Vietnam, what did the rest of your time in the Navy look like?
We went from there across to Hong Kong for 5 days or 6 days R&R. On the way across, we ran into a Force 9 gale.
Oh, really?
So pretty similar seas to what you probably have seen from Cyclone Alfred. We've just had off the coast here. It was rough. We didn't do very much for 3 days. We just hung on. closed everything down. Everything was locked down. So if you moved from point A to point B, you made sure that it was tagged down. Got into Hong Kong Harbour. We stepped off the Liberty boat. We had to take our shoes and socks off, roll our whites up to our knees, and we stepped into calf-deep water, just running off the hills. They'd had 6 inches of rain in 1 hour, so you could imagine what maybe you can't imagine what it was like, because Hong Kong's built right on the side of the mountain.
Yep.
And walking, you had to walk up off the main street to see what was going on. I did a bit of exploring, and in one of the alleyways, just up from the business district, we called it the European Quarter. They were only little alleyways, they'd probably be 12 feet apart. In one of them I saw at least 6 American big Chevys or whatever they had in those days, the floating battleships. 8 of them, 6 or 8 of them, just stacked up, they'd been washed down.
Yeah, wow.
And out the front of one of the big high-rise buildings on the European Quarter, there was a shanty town, and there was that much water, it took from just in front of the foundations of the high-rise and washed it down the hill with all the shanty people in it gone.
Must have been a sight to see.
Well, I didn't see it, but this just a great big gouge, and here's this 20, 30-storey building housing all the European people in Hong Kong.
Right, so you find yourself in Hong Kong, it's all flooded to hell and back. Is this sort of what you'd pictured when you'd imagined, sailing around the world on a grand adventure when you were younger?
No, nothing like that. It only took a couple of days to disperse, and then we couldn't get up top of Mount Victoria for the cable car to have the picture of the beautiful harbour there, but I missed that out. But we went out to the border, and we watched the Chinese guards on one side, and we walked to within about half a mile of them and thought, no, those blokes have got guns. We're not going to go any closer. So we turned around and just explored Hong Kong.
Yeah, smart move, I would have said. Smart move. Well, how had your service differentiated from what you expected going in? Obviously, when you're 16, you've got a very different idea of what it'll be compared to what it is. But how did the reality differ from what you thought it might be?
The reality caught up with me just after Vietnam. If you wanted promotion, you had to sit exams or tests which gave you credit for time off promotion-wise. I had to do another 6 years before I'd get the next level. And I thought, no, I can't repeat this for the next 6 years. So I asked for and was given early discharge.
Okay, so how long did you ultimately spend in the Navy?
I think it was 4.5 years.
And originally you'd signed up for the 12.
Yep.
There you go. Well, 12 years in the end was a very long time.
Was going to be too long for me.
Are there any particular stories or any moments that really stick out from your time in the Navy that you haven't mentioned?
I liked being at Cerberus because I had free access, not being under training or anything. I had free access to the pool and the gymnasium, and I spent quite a lot of my time in the pool.
Was being out on the ocean everything you expected it to be? Did you end up enjoying it?
Look, it was fascinating. Sunrises, sunsets, chasing the flying fish along the sea as we go it through the coral sea and have them flutter on the deck and give them a kick to get them back in the water.
Yeah.
Just magic moments like that.
How old were you when you eventually, were discharged?
I was just short of my 21st birthday.
So that's just incredible that you had what some people would almost consider, a career's worth in the Navy.
Yep, I had a lifetime in the Navy that most people hadn't reached by the time they were 25 or 30.
Yeah, and it's all over before you've even reached 21. I mean, do you sort of reflect on that, on just how young you really were when all of this happened?
My life's got in the way since then. Haven't had very much time recently to reflect back on it, but no.
Because as you said, that's a lifetime of adventures, and you've done it all before you even hit 21.
By the first time I returned home to meet my friends, there was a world of difference between us already.
In what ways?
We'd learned discipline. We were more worldly. We knew how to take risks, and we took risks. And our friends were still stuck on the Saturday night dances and trying to chat the girls up. We weren't, should we do it? Should we do it? Well, we won't do it. No, we just barged straight in. We'd learnt that. It took a while, but we learnt it.
Well, what was life generally like when you did come back to it? Because as you said, you'd sort of been removed from what might be a typical Aussie teenage life, and you'd sort of come back a very different person. What was it like settling back into civilian life?
I found it a bit of a shock because coming back, I believed I had a lot of experience in particularly life matters and where I'd been and what I'd seen. It didn't matter in civilian life. You just turned up for your job at 8:30 or 9 o'clock. You had your 10-minute break at morning tea, you had lunch. You went back to work at 5 o'clock, you hopped on the train and went back home or wherever you were living.
What job did you settle into when you got back?
The first job I got when I came back, I went into an engineering works in Hamilton, and I did a bit of clerical work there, checking all the people's timesheets and their job sheets, checking them for accuracy. And that was the first of many jobs that didn't last because they were too mundane.
Well, I suppose when you've spent, better part of your teenage years sailing the ocean, mundanity would be something that's kind of hard to avoid.
It was.
When you settle back into the usual Australian workforce.
Yeah, because I'd been all up the east coast, I'd done the west coast, I'd been through New Guinea showing the flag, Vietnam and all those places. At one stage we were attached to the Indonesian confrontation, which was in the Malaysian emergency, so we had plenty of time to practice action stations and keep our eyes peeled. And then step back into the civilian world, which was cotton-wooled and pretty quiet.
As you said, getting back, you'd be very different to most 20 or 21-year-olds your age who hadn't seen what you'd seen and done what you'd done.
Yeah, most of them wouldn't question authority, and if anybody wanted me to do something, why?
Yeah.
What's the purpose of that? Why don't you do it this way? That's not the way it's done here. Okay.
Maybe some of that teenager did stick.
Somewhere.
So, moving forward, I understand you got involved, actually the DVA stuff. Tell me a bit about that. What is the DVA, first of all?
Department of Veteran Affairs.
Yep.
Yeah. When I finally retired from work, I was lucky enough to get out. I worked in the public service and it gave me the opportunity to retire at 60. So when I retired, I had a couple of years annoying my wife, and she said, "You've got to get something to do, otherwise this marriage is not going to last much longer." I said, "Oh, okay." So I got an opportunity to become secretary of the Vietnam Veterans Association, Gippsland branch. Whilst doing that, I got another opportunity to take over, or not to take over, but to take up a position with the West Gippsland Veterans Welfare Centre, assisting veterans with their claims against the Department of Veteran Affairs for their eligibility for entitlements for war-caused injuries.
Had you been involved in much veteran advocacy before you ended up in this role post-retirement?
No, I hadn't.
Yeah.
No.
Hadn't given it much thought before?
No. When I started to read up about our Australian history, our service history, there was quite an anomaly between what the veterans were eligible for and what the department was saying that they were entitled to. So, being me, there's an inequity here. Let's see what I can do to assist to even it out.
What was that like?
Enjoyable, challenging but enjoyable, because you had people who had contact with the department who were becoming very frustrated. And we'd talk to them after being trained in the initial TIP package, which was initiated by the Vietnam Veterans Association. The Department of Veteran Affairs took it over and they made it another program which was called ATDP, and don't ask me what the acronym was, I just can't remember it immediately.
That's all right.
And we all had to get professional qualifications. That was no problem to me because I'd already been back to school, because after I left the Navy I realised I had nothing, didn't even have a matriculation certificate. So I went to adult education and got that, did a couple of degree courses, and by the time I was 45 or something, I'd had my brush with academia. And so when I got stuck back into this ADTP stuff, it wasn't as hard as some people found, because they'd had nothing to do with schooling since the time they left the services and got involved with trying to help the vets.
Well, I mean, it's quite a, I mean, it's a pretty noble pursuit, you know, trying to help veterans, you know, get the compensation that they feel like they
There was nothing noble where I was concerned. It was getting back at the department for all the years, from Second World War right through to Korea and Vietnam, withholding what the people were entitled to. I went to a seminar yesterday, and they summarised the DVA as delay, deny and die. That's the 3 stages that the DVA want people to go through.
So when you did advocate for these veterans to get their compensation, what sort of success rate were you looking at there?
I never checked on the success rate.
But there were cases of successful appeals and such.
Appeals I didn't have to do.
Yeah.
There was only one appeal that we pushed on to a higher advocate. That ended up being successful, but that wasn't my fault. The process was you had to fill out government bureaucracy, red tape, paperwork in the manner using the wording that they wanted to see. And we got trained in how to do it. We learnt the 3 acts, the Veterans Entitlement Act, Circa, Merca, Durka, and we were able to interpret it and assist the veteran on the process to go through. And above all, please be patient, because this could take 3 years.
Which is quite
ludicrous.
Horrific, given that there'd be plenty of blokes that you'd be advocating for and plenty of people that wouldn't even have 3 years left.
Yep.
I mean, 3 years for anyone is a crazy amount of time, much less, you know, some of these people who've been through so much.
Apart from that, it's the frustration of not being able to get recognised for their service.
So obviously this is a big sweeping question, and, you know, there's a lot that goes into it, but what sort of changes do you think there need to be to help with that sort of situation?
Basically, there's probably 2. One, the politicians have to start walking the talk, not talking it. And the other thing is that DVA has to change its mindset as well. DVA will not allow ex-service people to be case managers. They don't want face-to-face contact with veterans. They want to do it all remotely, as per whatever their lockstep method is, and keep their public service jobs going. Cynical, I know, but it's true.
Do you know how many veterans you would have, I guess, advocated for and fought for in your time? Do you know?
No. When we closed the Veterans Welfare Centre last month, we ended up with, I think it was 60 or 70 live files, which we had been waiting on responses from the DVA for the last 2.5 years. We made an appeal to the DVA to push it through, and we had it all closed and up within 6 months. But they could see a light at the end of the tunnel, so let's get rid of these ones and move on.
That's extraordinary. 60 plus live cases.
Graham, the centre manager, he'd worked it out that we'd handled, in the 28 years that he'd been there, we'd handled thousands of cases, not hundreds.
Yeah, I mean, that's just, a credit to you and the organisation, but at the same time, as you said, an indictment on the system that just
the system's supposed to be there for the veterans, but I have not seen any evidence of that.
One thing that I wanted to just mention, and if you don't want to chat about it, that's fine, but I understand that you've got a son who's currently serving. Did you want to
He is, yes. He's in the Air Force, fairly high up in the Air Force, and at the moment he's based in Canberra.
Yeah. What's that been like for you personally, seeing
It was
him?
good for him, good for me. I said, don't join the Navy.
Did he have intentions of joining the Navy originally?
No. The Army chased him for a while, but he said, no, I don't want to go. I don't want the Army, I want the Air Force. So he followed that up, and yeah, he's been there 26 years now.
Yeah, wow. That's a fair stint.
Mm.
I mean, as a retired serviceman yourself, you must be, there must be some pride there,
I was
surely?
fairly proud of him. Yes, he's been around the world and represented Australia. He actually led the 100-year anniversary parade in France for the Air Force.
Yeah, wow. Jeez, that's a pretty big honour.
Yeah, it was good for him.
Yeah. Well, before we wrap it up, was there anything that you wanted to touch on that maybe we haven't touched on? Any stories, anything in particular that you thought might have been worth bringing
Oh, look,
up?
I'm sure there's things I'm hidden.
That's all right. That's just an indictment on me for not bringing them up.
But no, I think that pretty well covers my service life anyway.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, John. Thank you for sharing your story and taking the time. I know that I've gotten a lot out of it, and I hope that you've gotten something out of it, of getting it all out there and talking about it. So
Probably the first time I've spoken in depth about any part of it. So
yeah, well, thank you for giving us the privilege of hearing it, because that's means a lot. And thank you again for coming in and giving us your time.
thank you.
The Warragul and Druin Gazette and the Warragul RSL would like to thank our guests for sharing their opinions and recollections of their service in Vietnam, as well as their later experiences after returning back into civilian life.